If you've ever heard someone say that they're shooting their camera wide open, all it means is that their aperture is at the lens's lowest point. For example, if you see a f2.8 lens, 2.8 is the lowest aperture or the fastest aperture that lens has. That will be the blurriest the background will get on that particular lens. That doesn't mean that 2.8 is the only aperture. It means 2.8 is the lowest. So most lenses, if they're 2.8, they can go to f16 or f22 still, but they cannot go lower than 2.8. This is wide open right here. Wide open aperture for this lens is actually 2, f2. This is closed aperture for this lens right now is at f22. Wide open, close. So to understand what aperture is, I'm going to first explain to you depth of field. Okay. Now, if a camera was shooting horizontal, for example, if the focus from my camera, the way you're seeing me now, was from, I guess this would be left to right or right to left, then we would call it width of field, right? Because it's horizontal. But we call it depth of field because the focus is front and back from the lens. But I want you to pretend that there's a camera right here and our subject of focus is this right here. Camera here, subject of focus is here. The way aperture works and the way depth of field works is your depth of field is essentially the distance between these 2 points. So focus is kind of like a force field. At 2.8, our focus is going to be about this width at a 2.8 aperture. If the aperture is 1.4, our focus will be about half that width, right? So as we move this force field forward, this first quarter or first third of this big lens right here is in focus with a 1.4. And then at 2.8, it's going to be double that. So maybe about half of it is in focus with a 2.8 aperture set, right? And remember, the camera's over here. Now, how this works is this is my subject of focus. This is where the focus is. Everything behind it, right? Everything behind where the focus is in the perspective of the camera. Camera, focus, behind, background. This is called your background. Everything in front of the focus over here is your foreground. Okay, so when we're talking about background and foreground, in focus, out of focus, what we're saying is in focus is subject of focus. Foreground is typically going to be blurry. Background is going to be blurry. How does aperture affect that? Aperture affects that essentially by changing how much is in that subject of focus. How wide is your focus? So f2.8, like I said, will be about here. But if you adjust it to about f13, it's here. So now, instead of just the front half of this lens being in focus, you have all of this in focus. If we went to f22, then perhaps this lens may be in focus as well from the view of this camera over here. Okay? What's the point of changing your aperture? Well, one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of photographers make when they first start is they shoot everything wide open. They shoot everything at the lowest aperture the lens they have on the camera can shoot. The problem with that is the aperture is adjustable for a reason. For example, you guys are looking at me through an f2.8 lens that's set to 2.8 because the focus of me in this the focus of this video is me conveying information to you. So I want the camera focused on me. However, if I was doing this video to talk about the background, such as Miles Morales right here, then I may want a focus that's more closer to f13. That way, not only would my face be in focus, but the background would be in focus as well, if that makes sense. Because remember, it's a plane. So right now we're at f2.8. It's hitting my face and cutting off probably about here or right through my shoulder. And it's slowly going to get more and more blurry as you get away from me. If this was 1.4, then if I stuck my head out like this, perhaps this would be a little bit more blurry. And like my face would look really, really in focus, but everything behind me would be really, really blurry. Okay, and that's what we call bokeh, that blurry effect based on your aperture. Now, to get that same blurriness or to get a similar blurriness, another thing we could do is just move your subject further away from the background. So if I wanted this to be more blurry, I would just move the camera and myself this way away from there, and the distance will also, affect it because like I said, you got the depth of focus here. everything is background, and the distance between those is going to change what's in focus and what's not, and how close it is. The point of having a 2.8 aperture or 1.4 or having your camera wide open is you want maximum focus on a singular point, on a specific point that is not very wide. If you want a larger aperture, the point of that is to have more of your background in focus, maybe to have more of the environment in focus. If you're doing studio flash photography, for example, you may have like a F, your F or your aperture set at 8 because you're already controlling the background. So you're not necessarily going to want to hide it. The background is probably like a plain white, sheet of cloth or paper or plain gray paper. So it really doesn't matter if it's in focus or not. You just want to make sure, because everything is so well lit, that you have the person that you're shooting's eyebrows in focus, eyes in focus, shoulders, neck, and everything like that. And because the lighting is so good, if you have 1.4, you may only get their eye and everything else may start to fade, and you'd actually notice because the lighting is illuminating everything. Because they're so well lit, you want to have the f8, the aperture of 8 to get everything. If you're doing a car, you may also want f8 because, of course, a car, you have the headlight. You may only get one headlight in focus if you're shooting wide open or at 2.8. Whereas if you shoot f8, you can get most of the car in focus while still getting some of the background blurry if that's not what you want to shoot. But if you actually like the background, what would you do? You would shoot at f13 or f22. Now, it's not a perfect science. The thing that you have to do is you have to experiment. When you're out on location shooting, you're going to want to start at maybe 2.8 and be like, okay, I need more things in focus, or I need less things. If you're shooting a family, for example, a higher aperture is going to be helpful. Whereas if you're shooting just one person in a street of people, and you just want to focus on that person, of course, the lower number the aperture, the better, because you want to keep those other faces blurred out. So that's really how aperture works. That's how depth of field works. I had a couple shoots that I didn't understand depth of field properly for, where let's say I was taking photos of a couple and I had one of them in focus and the other out of focus because I shot wide open all the time, because I heard all these YouTubers talk about the fastest lens and oh, get the 2.8 aperture or get the 1.4, and very few people talked about why you need this type of aperture and what you use it for. So I don't want you guys to fall in that trap. I hope this video adds value to you. If it does, definitely drop a comment, drop a like, or subscribe. I will be making plenty of videos like this because my goal for this channel is to help people, while I do this myself, make an impact with their cameras, make money with their cameras, change their lives, their family lives, and the lives of people around them. Cameras can be a ticket to get us to rooms that otherwise we couldn't get into. We're going to do that together on this channel. So I'll see you guys next video. This is Aperture Explained, and you're watching Servant Studios. Or this is the video called Aperture Explained on Servant Studios. You know what I mean. I'll see you next video. Peace.